All right, we are here in the state of Florida versus Noah Williams. Let's start with appearances of counsel.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Lauren Marie Anderson on behalf of the state.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Dan Eckhart, and seated next to me is Mr. Noah Williams.
All right, and our hearing today was for all pending motions for benefit of counsel. What I saw is the pending motions were defendant's motion to bifurcate the gang enhancement, defense first motion in limine, defense second motion in limine, defense third motion in limine, and defense fourth motion in limine. I have reviewed, well, it looks like the state has filed a motion to revoke bond as well. I have reviewed everything through the defense fourth motion in limine. Anything we need to add?
Not other than the motion to revoke bond.
Okay.
No, the only thing I guess maybe we have to talk about it while I'm still here in town is the prosecutor's just notified me she's going to motion for continuance.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to talk about that today while I'm here, because the one issue we've got is we got an expert witness from Ohio who's made her travel reservations, plane, hotel, and she's got a outstanding invoice with us. So that's the only thing financially we've got to try to figure out if I can work with, and I'm willing to work with the prosecutor, but that's an issue for us.
And Your Honor, I do have a written motion. I was going to address that at the end, but if Your Honor would prefer to address that now, we can.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's start with that. Maybe we'll put it aside and go to the other things and come back to it. We'll see. All right, Mr. Eckhart, have you received a copy of the state's motion for continuance?
Yeah, I just got it, Your Honor.
All right, so state has suggested October 3rd or October 24th. October 3rd, just looking at my trial list here, is most likely Mr. Williams's case would be reached just on ordinary priorities, and if I were to continue it, I could certainly. I mean, the priorities up to my, but I'm pretty sure he'd be reached the week of the 3rd. The week of the 24th, I do have a murder case that is older than Mr. Williams' case that I think probably will go to trial. So I'm just giving that, putting that out there for counsel's benefit. Let me hear from the defense on the motion to continue.
Yeah, Your Honor, I just want to preference this with, as far as continuances and working with opposing counsel, whether I'm on prosecution side, defense side, never had a problem with it, never will have a problem with it. The only thing that's a problem with this case is we went ahead and retained an expert in Ohio. She's already invoiced us. I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to recapture these fees, or she'll move these fees forward. Her fees are $4,579.94. She's booked her airfare and she's booked her hotel. So that's something I've had an opportunity to talk to her about. My co-counsel, David Bigney, I know that him and I have, coordinated for the trial to be on the 19th, and it's been the 19th for a while now. The case has been filed, I think, back in June of last year. So that's the issue I have, is the financial hit that we'd have to take. And so but again, I haven't had an opportunity to talk to her about that. If that's something that she's willing to work with us on, and as far as the flight and the flight and the hotels, then it might not be a problem going the 3rd, but I've got to try to get a hold of her and figure that
Okay.
out.
What is the subject matter of her expertise?
She is the DNA expert, and that's, and I'm sure the prosecution can add to this, but this case really comes down to trace DNA.
Right.
12% of his DNA was on a handgun.
I mean, obviously, I can't speak to her billings. The hotel most likely could be canceled. Airfare, probably going to be some kind of penalty there.
Again, I'm obviously willing to work with the prosecution on this. It's just something that I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the DNA expert about.
I understand. When, just in candor, Mr. Eckhart, it's the reasons provided by the state for the motion to continue seem reasonably well placed. When do you think you might be able to find, putting aside cost issues, your expert's availability for that week?
I can try to contact her as soon as the hearing's over. I can get on the phone with her. I drove up from Orlando, and so I emailed her yesterday. She emailed her invoice, I think yesterday or the day before.
If I'd like to settle as many of these issues as we possibly can.
Yeah.
If I give you about 5 minutes, do you want to take a shot at giving her a call to see if she's available?
Yeah, I can try to reach out to her herself.
I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
John, that would be October 3rd.
October 3rd.
And just so we have to come back for this. So the 3rd, and the way we envisioned it the last time would be getting a jury in the morning, doing openings and openings in the afternoon, and then going from there. So it'd probably be,
I can work around that. I mean, it's we can also open on Tuesday.
Okay.
I can pick a jury in the afternoon. We can open on Tuesday.
I just was trying to get her so that she's, available for the testimony, because she was going to come in on Monday night, be available Tuesday in case the state's evidence was only a day. She could possibly testify in the afternoon and also be available the next day, which is a Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's kind of what.
So it's keep in mind, this is a little bit of guesswork. Just looking at the trials I have set for the 3rd. I think this would be the only case we'll be trying to try that week.
Okay.
So see what our availability is that week. If we needed to take a day break between presentation of the state's case and presentation of the defense case, we can do that too.
Okay, I'll give her a call.
Okay.
I was able to, I just left a voicemail and also texted her. I did contact my colleague's office, David Bigney.
Okay.
His assistant said that he's available the 3rd and the 4th, but he is Jewish, and I guess the 5th is Yom Kippur. I don't know if the courts are closed here, but
They're not.
They're closed in Orlando. And, so that's where we're at.
Okay. Well, I would certainly, to the extent your co-counsel would want the court to, I can certainly accommodate his religious holiday as well. All right, I'm going to grant the motion to continue. I'm going to reset the case for trial on jury selection on October 3rd. Final pretrial will be September 28th.
Judge, I just point out, I may not have an expert witness for the DNA, and this case is really a DNA case. That's the only issue I can.
If that turns out to be a problem, Mr. Eckert, bring it to my attention, and we will do everything we possibly can to accommodate it, including if we need to continue the case again, we will. I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that there's bond issues we're dealing with as well. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get it on the 3rd. I'm hoping that your expert doesn't have a conflict.
And final pretrial was the 28th, Your Honor?
Yep, September 28th. All right. That addresses the motion to continue. Why don't we work our way from the order of filing through the pending motions? So that would bring us to the defendant's motion to bifurcate the gang enhancement.
Your Honor, as it relates to the motion in Lemony 4 and motion to bifurcate, the state will be calling a witness and introducing evidence.
Okay. Well, it's the defendant's motion, so I think for procedural purposes, we need to start with the defense, and then we'll get there.
Your Honor, I just would like to start off, I guess, the whole analysis in this case with all these motions, and that this is not a complex case. I think I mentioned that in one or two of these motions. It's a felon in possession case. And one of the things that I think is important for the court to know is the strength of the government's evidence, which I've been through discovery several times. We're ready to go to trial next week. It's DNA evidence. There's no eyewitnesses. There's no admissions. And so it's a really difficult case for us to understand as to why it was even charged. And the danger that really lies beneath this gang evidence and later on this video evidence is now what you've got is you have this huge bucket of information that the government is trying to arguably taint the jury with. And I think the last thing anybody wants in this courtroom is for anybody, whether it's him or anybody else, to be found guilty, not on the evidence, but on some improper purpose. And that's really the whole driving force behind my motion to bifurcate. And I've read the cases, and one of the things that is probably one of the more compelling cases is the Hayes case. I mean, the Hayes case, in this courthouse, but that's a murder case. If we had a murder case, if this was a crime of violence, if Mr. Williams was charged with carjacking or armed robbery, right, I could see it, no question. Let the gang evidence in. but it's a simple possession case. And it's not even really a possession case. I mean, the handgun undisputedly is found in a vehicle. His girlfriend's driving the vehicle. She has a concealed weapon permit. She's the owner of the vehicle. And again, you've got a 12% DNA match, which again, this expert in Ohio, that's why it's so compelling that she testified before this jury. That's it. No fingerprints, nothing else. And so that's really something that I think is of major import for your decision. I've read all these cases that were sent just this morning. And I don't know where this fits in with the Williams rule as far as whether this, there's supposed to be some sort of official notice because of not only with the gang enhancement information, but with some of this other information, if this has to be disclosed in a different format. We just recently received it, but we're here today to make these arguments. I've got all the cases, cited in my memo. I'm not here to read my memo again or to, take the court's time. But again, the strength of the evidence in the state's case, I think, is highly relevant as to whether this case should be bifurcated or not, because it is just a felon in possession case. The other thing is we're kind of caught behind the 8 ball, so to speak, because we don't know what is going to be said. Gang evidence runs the gamut. If you look at the cases, there's a lot of California cases that were provided this morning. I think I've provided some cases from other jurisdictions. And what courts have recognized is that if gang evidence is to be allowed, it should be carefully tailored. That testimony should be carefully tailored so that the gang expert is not going to provide the jury with all sorts of gory details of, all the shootings the gang was involved with all the violence that all the gang members were involved in for, whatever time period is relevant to the case. So that would be an issue that if there is not bifurcation, that testimony should be narrowly tailored so that this gang expert doesn't provide such inflammatory evidence, again, that the jury is making the decision for the wrong reason. In my motion, I talked about how this really is a sentencing factor. We understand how it was charged. It was charged with a gang enhancement. Allegedly, there's 2 gangs. I guess it's Out East and 6 Block, and that's going to be the nature of the government's evidence. Again, we don't know exactly what's going to be said, but we think that the proper way for this court to handle this case is for the defendant to be judged by his peers as to whether he possessed a handgun, whether he possessed the firearm, the Glock, and not as to whether he associates with, these gang members or alleged gang members who are involved in all sorts of other criminal activity, which he's never been charged of. He's not charged in any of these cases. So now before the jury, they're going to hear all these terrible things that are going on here in Jacksonville, and come to the wrong decision for the wrong reasons. So the other case that I think is probably one of the best is Gonzalez versus State. That's a Nevada case that I provided for you, and that talks about the reason for bifurcation. I know the prosecution has provided a number of California state cases where there wasn't bifurcation and did involve gang members. There's one that's a felon possession case. Off the top of my head, I don't have the site that was provided by the state, but that case is different. It involves a person with a gun. He's got the gun. There's witnesses who see him with the gun, and that goes back to my first point: the strength of the evidence in the government's case. And he's with other gang members. Here, the evidence I think is going to be that he was coming back from a funeral of a gang member, but nobody's seen him with a gun at the funeral. There's been no testimony that from any of the intelligence from the gang members or the gang intelligence unit that he's bringing a gun to the funeral. He was going to shoot anybody at the funeral, or that gun ever left that glove box of that car. So that's really the arguments I want to make. We were provided with, I guess, on the 24th of this month from the prosecutor that several police reports involve a murder of Malik Beals and then a funeral of a Malik Beals. Those instances both took place in September of 2020. So the gang evidence or the testimony that is going to be brought before the jury is something that happened back in 2020 for a simple firearm possession case in March of 2021. When the traffic stopped, March 4th of 2021. That's all I have on the issue, Your Honor. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Not really. I mean, your motion lays it out.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What your position is clearly. All right, let me hear from the state.
Your Honor, at this time we would call Detective Dable.
All right.
I do.
Whenever you're ready, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Detective Daigle, Daigle,
Detective Daigle, where are you currently employed?
the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office,
How long have you been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
for over 6.5 years now.
And in what unit are you currently assigned?
Currently, I'm in the gang unit
And how long have you been in the gang unit?
since January 2020, so coming up on 3 years.
Prior to your time in the gang unit, were you assigned to any other investigative units?
Yes,
What unit was that?
I was assigned to narcotics.
While in narcotics, was there a specific side of town that you were assigned to?
Yes, the East Side,
And how long in total have you been in investigations?
for over 3 years now.
Can you explain to the court what your duties as a gang detective are?
Yes, we implement strategies to combat gang crime in the city. We also are assigned certain gangs and groups in the city, and we follow them every day on a daily basis via certain ways of reports or social media, whatnot. We document gang members and associates. We also purge them, so purge them from the system. And then we have a thing that's called a customs notification, and we do those as well.
Have you participated in any training courses as it relates to your duties as a gang unit detective?
Yes, I have. I've attended conferences with the Florida Gang Investigators Association. I've completed their basic and intermediate specialist courses. I've also attended a couple HIDA classes in reference to gang investigations. And then I've also taken social media and cell phone technology classes.
Have you also undergone additional training just as it relates to your duties as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, when I originally started out, I started in the academy, completed the basic law enforcement instruction. And after that, I joined the FTO program, and which is basically like the on-the-job training side of law enforcement. And then while in patrol, I think I did a couple of patrol classes, and then in narcotics, I took a couple of drug-related courses.
As a member of the gang unit, do you collaborate with other gang detectives?
Yes,
Do you obtain information from other investigative units and information share?
yes.
Why is that?
So basically, I'm not on call 24/7. So if another gang detective responds to a scene that one of my gangs or groups that I'm assigned to look at or investigate is involved in it, then we'll come to the table the next day and we'll share the information between each other.
How many gang members would you say during your entire law enforcement career that you have come in contact with?
I'd say hundreds.
And as a member of the gang unit, are you assigned to certain gangs?
Yes,
How many gangs have you been assigned to?
approximately 4 or 5.
Are you currently assigned to the criminal gang out east?
Yes,
How long?
for about 2 years, a little over 2 years.
Now, prior to your assignment over out east, were they already documented under Florida Statute 874?
Yes,
And do they have any what you would refer to as subsets?
they do.
What's the primary subset that you investigate?
1,200.
What is the primary activity of the criminal organization subset 1200?
It's narcotic and gun-related offenses.
And is there a specific area of town that they occupy?
They occupy the east side of town.
Are you familiar with the members and associates of 1200?
I am.
Now, detective, often when we think of gangs or hear people say gang, we think of an organized gang like the Bloods. Is that how 1200 operates?
No, they are a hybrid gang.
Can you explain to the court what a hybrid gang is?
So a hybrid gang is basically it's a group of individuals that occupy a side of town or a specific neighborhood that they rep. They don't have a set hierarchy per se like the Bloods do, but they do commit crimes together.
What about rules? Do they have a specific set of rules?
No,
During the course of your investigation, did you document and review documentation of members of 1200 under Florida Statute 874 criteria?
yes,
Now, among that criteria for consideration, did hand signs, style of dress, and tattoos become a consistent feature for members?
yes,
Let's first talk about hand signs. Are there any hand signs that are specific to 1200?
there are.
And what would those be?
It'd be this right here, formulates to 12.
Is there a hand sign that they also do in order to disrespect a rival gang?
Yes,
Can you demonstrate that to the court as well?
If the deceased gang member or associate of the rival gang, they'll, like, one of them's 35, they'll do 3-5 like this, or do it down, or they'll hold it up while they're smoking weed, or do stuff like that.
Okay. Now, what about style of dress? Is there a style of dress that 1200 uses?
Yes, they usually partake in like chains and T-shirts that respect like fallen members and associates of the gang.
Have you become familiar with tattoos that are common to members of 1200?
Yes,
How?
by visually looking at them on their body.
What is the most common type of tattoo that you see?
Ones that show respect to fallen members.
Are you familiar with an individual named Noah Williams?
Yes,
How did you become familiar with Noah Williams?
through my investigation in 1200.
Do you see him here in court today?
I do.
And can you just identify where he's seated?
He's seated next to his attorney at the table wearing a green shirt.
Okay. Your Honor, may the record reflect that he's positively identified the defendant.
Yes.
Is Noah Williams documented as a criminal gang member of Out East?
Yes,
When was he first documented?
he was originally documented in 2016, and then I redocumented him in 2021.
Why did you redocument him in 2021?
So for Florida state statute, after 5 years, if you don't no longer meet the criteria, you're purged and removed from the system as a gang unit or gang member, excuse me.
So once you're documented, you're not documented for life.
That's right.
Have you purged individuals
Yes,
from Out East?
yes.
In 2021, what criteria did Noah Williams meet?
He associated with one or more known criminal gang members. You see him flashing the hand sign that's used by the criminal gang, and he adopts a style of dress and tattoos that are identified by the criminal gang. And I've spoken to many sources that have identified him as a member of 1200.
Is that more criteria than he met in 2016?
Yes,
Are you also familiar with him being a rapper?
yes.
And what type of rap does he do?
Drill rap.
And you've already explained to this court in a different hearing what drill rap is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Detective, what date was this defendant stopped in a traffic stop?
March 4th, 2021.
On that date, was there an event occurring?
Yes, it was a viewing that night for Darian Sulf.
Who is Darian Sulf?
He's a documented member of 1200.
Was he, you mentioned it was a viewing. How did he die?
He was murdered in Orlando.
Was he with anyone when he was murdered?
Yes, he was with his girlfriend and an individual named Brandon Bevel, who was an associate of 1200.
And was that on February 20th of 2021?
Yes,
Did he go by any nicknames?
Michi.
Did you know through your investigation him to have a relationship with the defendant?
Yes, he claimed to be the CEO of A-Team Records, and A-Team Records is one of the entertainment groups that 1200 uses.
Was there a heavy police presence at this viewing?
Yes, there was. The gang unit was there. I think there was 1 or 2 FBI agents there, and then the CPR task force was there as well.
Why was there this heavy police presence?
Because there was a previous incident at a funeral for Malik Beals.
Who is Malik Beals?
He's a documented associate of 1200 who was murdered.
And does Malik Beals have any nicknames?
He goes by Leaky.
What date was he murdered?
It was September 2nd of 2020.
When he was murdered, was he in the car with anyone?
Yes, he was with Noah Williams and Marquez Johnson.
Who's Marquez Johnson?
He's another documented 1200 gang member. He goes by Little Quez.
Now, was there a funeral that followed the murder of Malik Beals?
There was.
On what date?
It was September 15th of 2020.
Now, you mentioned that there was the heavy police presence at Darian Sulf's viewing because of something that happened at Malik Beals' funeral. What was that?
It was a shootout between rival gang members.
What rival gangs?
6 Block and 1200.
You mentioned 6 Block. Who's that?
It's a gang that occupies the north side of the town.
And has there been an ongoing dispute between 1200 and 6 Block?
Yes.
For how
about
long?
10 years.
10 years? Have you become familiar with 6 Block and its members?
I have.
Were any arrests made following that shootout at Malik Beals' funeral?
There was.
Who was arrested?
Alex and Alan Bass and Keon Newkirk.
Who are Alex and Alan Bass?
They're documented members of 6 Block.
And you mentioned Keon Newkirk. Who is that?
He's another documented member of 6 Block. He goes by the nickname Dolo.
Now, to your knowledge, was Noah Williams present during that incident?
No, ma'am.
Is this incident later referenced in a music video that this defendant is a rapper in?
Yes.
Who else is in that song?
Desan Williams, his nickname is Greenlight, and he's also a 1200 gang member.
Was he present at Malik Beals' funeral?
Yes.
What is the name of that song?
It's Dead N-Words.
Is there a music video that accompanies that song?
Yes,
And have you viewed that music video?
I have.
Are you familiar with its lyrics?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
And I'm showing him State's Exhibit A, which I have already talked to defense counsel about, so he's aware what is on this disc. Detective, have you seen this disc before?
Yes.
And how do you recognize this disc?
Oh, my signature's on it.
Okay, what does this disc contain?
Oh, the music videos.
Are there 3 music videos
Yes.
that we'll be referencing today?
Yes.
And are they substantially in the same condition as they were on YouTube when you viewed them?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state states A is evidence.
All right. Any objection from defense?
I just don't know how you can authenticate something off of YouTube. You have to go to the publisher of the record label. I don't know if that self-authenticating, it's on YouTube.
Hey,
Your Honor,
response?
he's not authenticating the music video. He's saying that these are the videos that were pulled from you.
But you can't, I'm just sorry, you're gonna put them in front of a jury or. use them as-
Well, I mean, it's not in front of a jury. When I'm taking it into evidence, I'm
I got it.
taking it into evidence for purposes of this particular motion in limine. Detective Bagel, did you pull the videos from YouTube
They're
yourself?
They're downloaded from YouTube.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever watch them on YouTube?
Yes, sir.
All right, is the videos you watched on YouTube, what's on the disc?
Yes, sir.
Taking into evidence for the limited purpose of this hearing.
Your Honor, do I have permission to publish throughout the testimony?
Yes.
Detective, is there anything on your screen at this time?
No, ma'am.
How about now?
No, ma'am. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, Detective, can you see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Who is this that we see at the very beginning of the video?
That's Greenlight.
Desan Williams?
Yes.
And what is he doing right now with his hands?
That's a hand sign for 1200.
What does his shirt say?
Says Cuckoo on it.
What is cuckoo?
It's another name that 1200 uses.
Detective, I paused it at 6 seconds. Who is that?
It's Noah Williams.
All right, and what does the side of his shirt say?
Cuckoo as well.
Hey.
Now I've paused it at 11 seconds. Is this again Noah Williams?
Yes.
What is that on his shirt?
It's 187 Boys, which used to be the entertainment group that they used before they used their A-Team Records.
And ATR is what is on his chain.
Yes.
Who is that?
It's K-Spaz.
And we're at 13 seconds for the record. What is he doing with his hands?
He's doing the 3-5, 35 for
Can you explain to the judge what that is?
yes, 35 is Antoine Williams. He also goes by PD. You'll hear him reference him as PD as well. And he was murdered. He was a 6 Block associate that was murdered.
If you don't want me saying fuck dead niggas don't die. And we still on evergreen cause the ops don't slide. Tell a cracker here, alcohol his ass take shot. They say Tiki ain't shot. Need you died at space drop. Beat ass to 35, they was all K shot.
Detective, I'm gonna ask you about a couple lyrics that we just heard. The first is, we still on evergreen because the ops don't slide. What is evergreen about?
Evergreen Avenue is on the east side of town, and it's a road that they're known to occupy traps or drug houses on.
Who is they?
1200 block.
All right, and he mentioned ops. What is an op?
It's in terms opposition. It's the rival gang.
And slide. What does it mean? Don't slide.
Means they don't come shoot the block up.
All right, we also heard him say, they say Tiki 8 shots. What is that around?
That's a reference to Tiki Williams, who is a murdered 6-block associate.
We also heard PD Ass took 35. They were all K shots. What is that a reference to?
It's a reference to 35 or PD's homicide.
So let's go and do a drill and hit them all with.
Detective paused at 33 seconds. Who is that individual?
That's Xavier Mitchell. He goes by Zay. He's another documented member of 1200.
And was he also present in another vehicle when Malik Beals was murdered?
Yes, he was.
Face shot. They know if they on the block, we probably finna swing round. It's 3 choppers in this world, we spraying 90 fuck around. Fuck them handguns, bitch. It's really going down. I'm my mama's son, bitch. They know we ain't playing around. They ain't even swinging back. We got too many fucking rounds. On that car, double back, and we gon' tear that bitch down. Spray 100 fucking rounds. Everybody getting low. Face shot the fucking driver, ain't know where they could go. We on every fucking side. Ain't nobody got no hope. If you swing through my shit, then that's exactly how it go. Bitch, you ran down on who? Bitch, I'm smoking 52. Lot of shots, spread a whoop and hit the whole fucking crew. Niggas sent my 50 shots and only hit me in the leg.
Detective, we're paused at 107. We just heard green light say, N-word send me 50 shots and only hit me in the leg. Is he referring to something that actually happened?
Yes, he's referring to when he was involved in a shooting and he got hit in the leg as a victim.
I send my 50 shots and I'ma hit you in the head. Murder one, code red, make sure everybody dead. Green like the whole corner or whatever's been said. I ain't kill him if he die, and he ain't get shot in the head. I know Dolo traumatized, he don't stop at lights that's red.
Paused at 119. We just heard green light again say, I know Dolo traumatized. He don't stop at lights that's red. What is he referring to?
The shootout at Malik Beals' funeral.
Did Dolo's vehicle actually come to a stop
Yes,
and green light, we believe, the shooting?
yes.
Stop it when we poppin' and let's everybody dead. We ain't never copping, please, niggas knowing how we play. Dead niggas don't talk, don't walk, they just land. Put a P in front of that nigga died cause he was playing. Cut the LA why I told the nigga bitch to drop the pen. Put an S in front of pen, they like all he do is spin. Add a dub and cut the S and P cause all we do is win. Know if you see me with light and leak, we probably full of bin.
Now we just heard Williams say, no, if you see me with light and leak, we probably fin a bed. Is leak the leak field
Yes,
and light, is that often what they call green light?
yes.
Mr. Spin a bin. What you did? Back the motherfucker with the Mac 10. Hold up, twin, where that Drake, we finna spin and spin again. Call the last nigga, walk his, hit his ass and hit his man. Another nigga, he ain't Shan. Bro, just show me what a band. I'm with Gucci, I'm with man. Spinning like a silly fan. Why my name in they mouth? Nigga must be a fan. Put that flame at his house. Bet that nigga come out in. Caught a swing for some clout. Bitch, we banging it out. We don't do no drive-by. Jump our game, we get out. Back a little, he survived. It's a shame they got out. Put that flame in his mouth. We tryna swing.
All right, so paused at 2:08. We just heard green light say, Kraka lived, he survived, put that flame in his mouth. Is Kraka a person?
Yes, it's Lorena Span. He's a documented member for 6-block and he's referenced as La Cracker or Cracker.
And put that flame in his mouth. What is flame?
It's a gun or gunshot. He's speaking of an incident where Lorena Span was shot in the mouth.
All right, detective. Are you also familiar with another song by this defendant called My Block?
Yes,
And is there a music video that accompanies that song?
there's not.
It's just audio? That's on
Yes.
YouTube?
Yes,
Okay. Detective, that audio is accompanied by a album cover, right?
yes,
On the bottom of it, it says "Coup Like," "Coup" we've already heard is a reference to coup, right?
yes,
And that's common to both.
it is.
We see Noah Williams on there,
Yes,
and next to him, who is that?
it's Reginald Williams.
And detective, I'm gonna play just the first 35 seconds.
I for my Glock. My Draco cost so bad. So honestly, I spent too fucking much to come through playing. I spent 300 on my drum. I should've cleared my tower, man. But all these niggas talking crazy, so my dog will understand. I paid 150 for the 10. That Glock got 50, let it spin. I gassed the car, gave it the cool, and they dropped 50 in this shit. Oh, she 18. We get that bitch 302, tell her it's lit. We need some 40 bullets, 7.62s, and 9 squid. I don't bite these.
All right, so I'm pausing it at 34 seconds. Is there a reference to purchasing this Glock in that?
Yes,
What's the lyric?
I gave her 300 for my Glock, I paid 300 for my Glock.
Okay. And then there's another lyric that refers to a female. What is that?
It's referencing a female being 18 and they give her $300 to go buy ammunition.
And that ammunition that's mentioned, he refers to 40 bullets, 7.62s, and 9s.
Yes,
All right, detective, the final video I want to talk to you about is a song called Drill Time. Are you familiar with that song?
yes.
And who is that song by?
Noah Williams.
Are you also familiar with the music video?
I am.
All right, so at the beginning of this video, there is what is labeled as a trigger warning.
Yes, yep,
And it says that it might cause nightmares. Is that accurate?
yes.
Who does it say it might cause nightmares especially?
The ops.
And that's the opposition?
Yes.
Back up on my demons. I need starters, I be fiending, bitch. Rocking all this ice, I be forgetting all my names, bitch. I can't say exactly what I seen, but no, I seen it. Hey, I bought, I will lead the whole world blind, and if I have to beef with all y'all, the whole world dying. I've been down so fucking long, feel like I'm sleeping underground. Who taught y'all how to take the mag and flip the clip at wartime? Oh, they ain't fucking with you, Spinner. Yeah, I know it, cool, that's fine. I told y'all Mookie lost his soul before the news said he died. I told y'all Rod K.
All right, detective, I'm gonna back up just a little bit here. We heard Noah Williams say, I told y'all Mookie lost his soul before the news said he died. What's that for reference?
Mookie is a reference into Marcus Jackson. He's a murdered, he got murdered and he was an associate of 6 Block as well.
The news said he died. I told y'all Rod K was dead before his body had got found. Oh, they ain't.
All right, I told y'all Rod K was dead before his body had got found at 54 seconds. What is that reference?
That's a reference to Gerard Bell. He went by Rod K. He was another murdered associate of 6 Block.
He says specifically, I told y'all Rod K was dead before his body had got found. Does that match what happened to Rod K?
Yes, his body was found at another location, I believe the day after the shooting.
And what you said? I bet them bitches hit me now. It's time to separate the real from the fake. Bro, on the real, these niggas fake. Like, Fizz, you good? No, I'm great. Still trying to find out why they hate. The only nigga should be mad. That boy I hit up with that Drake. That boy got hit all in his face. It was a fucking closed case. Now I'm gonna switch my flow, won't say no more. I swear that's for the J. These niggas died for talking shit and now they ain't got shit to say. These niggas wild and I don't play. I'm gonna shoot some shit by Ray. Go pick up Duce, acting stupid. Shoot a movie with this K. If I pop out, I got my gun on me. Oh, that.
At 1 minute and 23 seconds, did we just hear him say, if I pop out, I got my gun on me?
Yes.
Those spins, you think it's sweet, oh, it ain't none, homie. Drilling shit for fun, homie. I can't with nobody but myself and this little gun on me. I told Mitch I might need some help. He said it's love, shorty.
And pausing at 1:33 seconds. Did we just hear him specifically mention Michi?
Yes.
And Michi is Darian Salt, correct?
Yes.
Reviewing that he.
Yes.
Hoes in his house, if my bros in his house, and we be spinning shit so all them traps be closed in the north.
All right, so we just heard him say, we be spinning shit so all those traps be closed in the north. What is a trap?
It's a house where usually narcotics are being sold out of.
What is the relevance of closed traps in the north?
Well, he's saying that we've been spinning, so the traps are closed in the north. So they're saying they're spinning the block. They're going out there to go shoot somebody or do a shooting on the north side, and that's why the traps are closed.
But who's on the north side?
6 Block.
my dog, I swear this shit been slow, it's a draw. And then they hit 3 back to back, we taking souls, then we out. Okay, back up on my demons. I need bodies, I be fiending, bitch. Rocking all this ice, I be forgetting I'm anemic, bitch. I can't say exactly what I seen, but no, I seen this shit. Mama say I'm blessed, but the police say I'm a demon, Drop him and don't say why I did it, he know the reason, bitch. I won't take no break, I've been at it, it's killer season, bitch. Choppy sitting up in the attic, next to the Christmas shit. I want that nigga Charles dead, I put that on my Christmas list.
I'm pausing at 2:08. We just heard him say, I want that N-word Charles dead. I put that on my Christmas list. Are you familiar with the person named Charles?
Yes, it's Charles Jones. He's a documented gang member for 6 Block. He goes by Folio.
And is he known to be a rival of 1200?
Yes.
Want them niggas all dead, I ain't dissing, I'm just venting. You be thinking I'm a war vet, I'm with hard headed, we blitzing. Who wanna fade, I'm on some clipper shit. You wanna play what shit, I'm still legit. I ain't go to school and sign up, but no, I'm still legit.
All right, the last thing I want to ask you, and I've paused it at 2:20, we heard him say, I'm with Hardhead. Who's Hardhead?
It's Xavier Mitchell.
And that is an individual that was with them when Malik did it.
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may just have one moment.
Sure, and Ms. Anderson, what was the title of the song we were just watching?
Drill time, Your Honor. Detective Daigle, I just have a couple additional questions on those music videos. The date that the music video Dead N-Words was published to YouTube, not filmed, but published to YouTube, was October 9th of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the date that My Glock was published to YouTube was November 28th of 2020.
Yes.
And Drill Time was published to YouTube February 28th of 2021.
Yes.
Now, in this case, there was DNA obtained for the defendant,
Yes.
and it was sent off to be compared to the firearm.
Yes.
After that was the defendant ultimately arrested.
He was.
When he was arrested, was he wearing something unique to the Gang 1200?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Sure.
And I'm showing him exhibit C. Do you recognize this item?
Yes, that image was on the back of the hoodie.
Okay. And you personally viewed the hoodie,
Yes.
and you personally collected the hoodie.
Yes.
And this looks substantially similar to what you saw in person.
Yes.
At this time, the state would enter state's exhibit C into evidence as state.
Did you say no objections? All right, we're received into evidence.
Thank you.
Purposes of the hearing.
Permission to publish.
Yes.
Detective, I'm gonna pull that picture up on your screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, can you just explain to the judge what we're looking at?
So the big thing is it's a tornado. Another moniker that Mr. Williams goes by is the Tornado Kid for rapping. But inside the tornado, you see an 8-ball, which is a reference to Trey D. His name was Lawrence Davis, and he was a affiliate of 6 Block, and he was murdered. Then the other one is 35, who is Antoine Williams. He goes by 35 or PD. He was also murdered. And then Mookie right there is an individual named Marcus Jackson, who was also murdered as well. And then at the very bottom, it has a tombstone with dead ops spelled out on it.
All right. As a part of your investigative duties, do you also monitor social media?
Yes.
Is there a platform that you primarily look at?
Yeah, Instagram.
Now, prior to the traffic stop on March 4th of 2020, did you observe a social media video that had this defendant and other documented gang members in it?
Yes.
Whose Instagram account was that posted to?
Deshaun Williams, green light,
Okay. What did you observe on Greenlight's Instagram?
a live video.
Can you explain to the court what a live video is?
Live video on Instagram is basically a feature of the story method, I guess, that captures what they're doing in real time.
Now, during that live video, do you see individuals of the rival gang 6 block actually joining to watch and comment?
Yes,
And are you familiar with the 6 block screen names through your investigation into 1200?
yes,
It's your job to stay up on the rival gangs as well, right?
yes.
Why would an opposing gang join and comment on someone's live?
It's usually they'll join the live to see if they can see where they're at, see if they can get a location on them, and then they'll comment on them to just trash talk on them.
Is this something you often see when you're viewing social media?
Yes,
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm showing you what has been marked as C Exhibit B. You recognize that?
yes.
And what do you recognize this disc to be?
The live video.
All right. And did you viewed it live, correct?
Yes,
And it was screen recorded?
yes,
And was that screen record then transferred to this disc?
yes,
Is it in substantially the same condition as when you viewed it online?
yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would enter C Exhibit B into evidence as state three.
No objection. All right, we'll receive it into evidence for the hearing.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
All right, Detective, just for the benefit of the court, is this what a live video looks like?
Yes,
At the top here, I've just circled it. What is that?
that's the account that the live video is being played on.
All right, and what is that screen name?
Green light.
And do we actually see green light in this shot?
Yes,
That's the only individual on the video right now, right?
correct.
Fuck wrong with you, man? I'm trying to go sit down.
He trying to be a cover girl and shit, and the nigga live.
He trying to steal.
He like a thief, man. He about to steal all the chains on the table. Hey, what y'all on?
Move forward to 25 seconds. At the bottom here that I've just circled, what are we seeing here?
You're seeing who's joining the Instagram live video, and you're seeing that's where the comments will pop up at as well.
Okay, so do you recognize any of the screen names that are on there right now?
Yes,
Can you read to the court which one you recognize?
it's the MM352XK.
Through your investigation, who do you know that screen name to be associated with?
Jarvin Jones, he's a documented member of 6 block.
And I'm gonna move forward to 42 seconds.
Dirty Glock, man.
All right, I'm gonna back up to 45 seconds. Do we see that MM352XK on there?
Yes,
And has he not commented?
yes, he commented what it is, coup.
Okay, so what we heard earlier was that coup is something that members of 1200 say.
Yes,
Why would a rival gang member say what it is?
just to taunt them.
Move forward to 309. At 309, do you recognize two screen names on here?
Yes,
Tell me what two screen names you.
Backstreet TK and G3 Liddy _.
All right, who is G3 Liddy _?
He's Gary Davis. He's a documented member of 6 block.
And Backstreet TK?
That is Tavares Kirkland. He's a documented member for a gang called ATK.
What is G3 saying?
He's saying me too.
Now, this follows a comment by Backstreet TK. What does his comment say?
He's basically telling Greenlight, I know where you're at.
And Gary Davis is replying, me too.
Yep.
God, he tweaking. That nigga just talking.
I told him to bust my head. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, hey, I almost sold you something, TK. Hey, you don't know shit, fuck nigga.
Pausing at 319. Did Deshaun Williams just respond verbally to what he's reading for Backstreet TK?
Yes.
That nigga bite that dog. I don't like him sitting behind my dog. And then you looking all eye pulling shit, holding on his gun and shit.
Your ass
You ain't get from behind my dog.
Whole thing alive on here.
What they gonna hear, bro? That's what they gonna hear.
He talking about all the like,
They gonna be like, what the fuck?
what the fuck is that?
Yo, they looking all maniacal and shit.
Damn,
They don't even see
gave
me
the
though.
try
They like I'm just like a black person.
Ghost, man.
Yeah,
That's how that shit be.
I like that though. You know that mean though.
You know what
I'm
that
back
means.
up on my demons. He bodies I be feeling.
They gotta take a picture of me.
You sound like a flagging ass.
No, you sound like
what
a-
this nigga on. That's how you sound.
I'm pausing it at 4:02. Do we see a comment again from Backstreet TK?
Yes.
What does he say?
You do too, you better get low, both of us coming through.
It sound like you want me to go to well.
That's the only thing I'ma show a nigga, man.
Pausing it at 4:08. Detective, can you tell what that outline looks like?
Looks like an extended drum magazine for a pistol.
Look like a superhero right now. That's the only thing I'ma show a nigga.
You should have that in the video.
And pausing it at 4:16. After green light shows that extended magazine, is there a comment from the account belonging to Gary Davis?
Yes, it's the 2 laughing emojis.
Detective, in the entirety of that social media video, do you hear or see any other individuals that you recognize?
Yes. Noah Williams and Shaheem Murphy.
We've already talked about Noah Williams, the defendant, but who is Shaheem Murphy?
He's a documented member of 1200 as well.
Was he actually in the car with Noah Williams when he was stopped,
Yes,
leaving Darian Salt's viewing?
yes,
And to be clear, that was later in the day after this video.
yes.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Any cross-examination, Mr. Eckhart?
Just real quick. You've talked a lot about things that you know about gang members, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you've got reports about all this stuff, right? You don't have it memorized.
It's reports and interviews
I mean,
with other gang members.
I spend 15, 20 minutes. I can't keep track of how many shootings you've talked about, and how many acronyms and how many. So you've got some reports on that stuff that I could look at, correct?
There's reports of shootings, yes, sir.
Okay. I just, Your Honor, I don't want to sidetrack this, but I'm
Sure.
gonna need those reports. I've not seen any of this stuff, okay? I'm sorry. And then in this last video, did you see this gentleman holding what you just said was an extended clip and a gun?
No, sir.
Okay. And then in any of these videos that we saw before, and I guess the prosecutor, there was no transcripts, correct? You have transcripts of these videos?
Like the lyrics transcripted
Yeah.
out? No, not physically, no.
So how do you understand what's being said?
Just by listening to them.
Do you listen to it the first time, can understand?
Usually, yes.
All these videos you watched, the first time you knew what was being said in those lyrics.
Yes, sir. I mean, I've listened to a lot of the videos and I can pick up on when they're talking about rival gang members, yes.
Okay, and then any of these videos, we talked about this funeral that was, I guess, on the 4th. That was the 4th of 2021. And it's safe to say you've been following his videos on social media, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he's put out a lot of videos, hasn't he?
Yes, sir.
Any of those videos talk about the funeral that he attended that night?
I don't recall.
Okay, and then before that, were there any, I guess within your intelligence community, was there any indication that this gentleman was going to be carrying a gun to the funeral?
Can you repeat that again, sir?
Sure. Did you have any specific information that he was going to be carrying a gun, let alone the Glock that's been charged in this case, to the funeral that night?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let me step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any other evidence?
No, Your Honor, no other evidence, just argument.
Okay. Heard argument from the defense. I'll hear argument from the state.
And Your Honor, I do have a PowerPoint. We just digested a lot of information. So I am going to pull that up just to kind of keep our timeline on track. I can just have a moment to do that. The state has provided this court with a lot of case law. And what Your Honor will notice is that there's not a lot of case law here in the state of Florida at this time regarding this issue. But what I would like to point out is that this issue is continually being litigated here, specifically in this courthouse. One of the opinions that Your Honor does have that was referenced by the defense is the state of Florida versus Henry Hayes case. And that citation, it's number 1D183876. It's a 2016 case that was argued in front of Judge Whittington, and it involved the gang enhancement and related evidence being used to show a timeline of events and motivation behind the charged crime. Now, something that Mr. Eckhart pointed out, rightfully so, is this is a murder case. And what you'll hear is a lot of the cases where this has been litigated are murder cases. But it is worth noting that 874.04 allows for this enhancement to be applied to all crimes, from a life felony all the way down to a second-degree murder. So whether or not the case law specifically addresses a second-degree misdemeanor, a first-degree felony, a second-degree felony is neither here nor there. The gang enhancement is there to be applied to any crime that the state of Florida charges, so long as the facts support it. Also, in this jurisdiction, another case that was argued before Judge Carbula is State of Florida versus Tyler Jackson, 19 CF 008869. That case was argued and tried in front of Judge Carbula this year. In that case, the defendant was charged with PFCF based on a music video, and evidence related to the gang enhancement was used to show the defendant's motivation for possessing a real firearm and not a prop gun. Also, in this jurisdiction, State of Florida versus Quinte Hudson, 2016 CF 004694. It's been argued and tried in front of Judge Daniel. Again, this is a murder case. It had the gang enhancement. There are companion cases that go along with Quinte Hudson that are still pending. State of Florida versus Hercules Bowers, 2017 CF 00695. And State of Florida versus Anthony Gregory, 2017 CF 007857. Again, in those cases, the gang evidence was allowed to be introduced, and it's not for the sole reason to show that the gang enhancement can be applied, but also to show motivation for the crime. That is what the state of Florida is seeking to do in this case. I have supplied the court with People v. Hernandez, 33 California 4th 1040, a 2004 case. This case discusses that this is at the discretion of the court. This is something that the trial court can decide to bifurcate or not bifurcate. And bifurcation is not necessarily warranted where the evidence is relevant to the charged offense. Evidence of the defendant's gang affiliation, including evidence of gang territory, membership, signs, symbols, beliefs, and practices, criminal enterprises, rivalries, and the like can help prove identity, motive, modus operandi, specific intent, means of applying force or fear, or other issues pertinent to guilt of the charged crime. To the extent that the evidence supporting the gang enhancement would be admissible at a trial of guilt, any inference of prejudice would be dispelled and bifurcation would not be necessary. I point this out because there was some talk about this being Williams' rule. The difference between the gang enhancement evidence and Williams' rule evidence is Williams' rule evidence is not to be made a feature of the trial. What is happening with gang-related evidence is it's showing the motivation. Why is the state of Florida saying that this defendant had that gun, that he's the one that was in possession of that gun, versus the legal lawful owner, who is Antonisha Bryant? That is why the state is arguing for this evidence. A defendant seeking severance must clearly establish that there is a substantial danger of prejudice requiring the charges be separately tried. The Hernandez court discusses the difference between bifurcation of a prior conviction and bifurcation of the gang enhancement. The court notes that prior conviction relates to the defendant's status and may have no connection to the crime, whereas the gang enhancement has to relate specifically to the material issue of that crime that's being charged, which makes it inextricably intertwined. So the state has provided a couple of other cases. There's not a lot of case law on this issue. So some of these were supplied just for the court to read. They're not binding on the court. Some of them are not even persuasive. In California, they do not publish all of their opinions. One of those cases is People v. Ezell, E-Z-E-L-L, 2017 Westlaw 414757. This case, again, is provided for commentary only. It is not persuasive to this court. But it's interesting because it uses the case law that is published in California, like Hernandez, in its justification for allowing the gang enhancement. It is not a case that has been overturned. In that case, the defendant was charged with simply possessing a firearm, which is exactly what we have here. And much like Mr. Eckhart's argument, the defense in that argument said that this was a fairly simple case. It is a fairly simple case. But in Ezell, the prosecution argued against bifurcation, pointing out that the gang enhancement evidence, which in that case was simply wearing gang attire, being with other gang members, and being in gang territory, was relevant and probative to the substantive charge. The trial court in that case denied the request for bifurcation.
What was the charge in that case?
Possession of a firearm.
Which case is that?
Ezell, People v. Ezell, E-Z-E-L-L. And again, this is not provided to the court as anything other than commentary. It is an unpublished opinion from California. But notably, it references Hernandez as well as Franklin. It goes on to say that gang evidence is relevant and admissible when the very reason for the underlying crime, that is the motive, is gang related. In Ezell, the prosecutor pointed to the gang evidence provided for several reasons why the appellant would have possessed the gun, which is allegiance to the gang, intimidating the community, and giving appellant's gang member companions access to the weapon. The evidence of gang attire, being with gang members, and in gang territory helped explain why he would have been carrying a gun. So what does the court have before it that is much like what we see in Ezell? Again, Your Honor heard a lot of information today, so we have this timeline. So what you heard is that this defendant was with other documented gang members and associates on September 2nd of 2020. In that car, Malik Beals was murdered in a shooting. The defendant was also in that car. Following that event, on September 15th of 2020, a funeral was held for Malik Beals. At that funeral, Desan Williams, Marquez Johnson, and Xavier Mitchell, who you all heard about and saw in videos, were all together, and they were targeted by members of the rival gang. 3 rival gang members were arrested: Alex and Alan Bass and Keon Newkirk, who goes by Dolo, which becomes relevant in the next slide. So we saw a music video for Dead N-Words, which features this defendant as well as Desan Williams, who goes by Greenlight. The purpose of this music video is twofold. The first is they're clearly flashing several symbols.
I don't mean to cut you off.
Sure.
We got 15 minutes left,
Yes.
and we're not even through the first motion. So I guess I do mean to cut you off. The issue for this motion is, I mean, we're just dealing, are we bifurcating?
Yes, sir.
We're not dealing with what evidence is coming in or what purpose is coming in. It's strictly, are we going to separate the trial from a simple possession of a firearm by a convicted felon? Or are we going to try sentencing enhancement at the same time?
Yes, Your Honor. And the reason that I'm trying to go through all of this evidence is because in order for the court to have the full picture of what would be put on and why the state believes it to be relevant is that timeline of events, why this defendant is the one carrying that gun. His DNA is on the gun. That is going to be the defense, is that it's transfer DNA. The gun belongs to Antonisha Bryant. The state is not shying away from that. There is female DNA on that gun. The state is not shying away from that. But the fact that his DNA is on that gun is important. We have to prove why it's not just transfer DNA, because all of these events leading up to this viewing where he is stopped is a motivation for him to carry a gun alongside his gang membership. All of these events. So he's shot at, and then he continues to bait the gang in these music videos that follow. And in one music video, he speaks directly to the fact that he gives money to females to buy things that he cannot buy. So it's that continued pattern, that continued timeline of the back and forth between the gang that creates the reason why this should not be bifurcated. That there is a motivation for this defendant to be the one carrying the gun and not Antoinisha Bryant.
I guess I'm still seeing it somewhat differently. So, and I'll give you an example from the evidence that's been presented. They've moved to bifurcate.
Yes, sir.
I have to make a ruling on whether the gang sentencing enhancement under Florida statute, whether the facts presented by the state to prove the gang sentencing enhancement are going to be presented to the jury at the same time
Yes,
as
Your
the
Honor.
facts for possession. Based on what I've seen, some of the facts that the detective introduced could be relevant to possession of a firearm by a convicted felon charge, or could be relevant to both membership in a gang or possession of a firearm by a convicted felon charge. I don't see it as necessarily a clear either or.
And Your Honor, that's why we put on so much, because I do
Right.
think that the court has discretion to say this can come in and this doesn't.
But I guess what I'm looking for from the state is Do-
Just a motion. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of floored me this morning. A motion from the prosecution in response to my motions. I mean, that might help with the issues.
you mean a written response?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they don't have to make, they don't have
Okay.
to file one.
Just-
If they don't want to file one, that's up to them.
Okay.
You know, the issues I'm concerned with is 403 balancing. You know, every piece of relevant evidence is subject to 403 balancing. I don't know, even if I denied the defense's motion to bifurcate, I assume they're still going to be objecting to each and every one of these pieces of evidence as they're brought in.
And Your Honor, that balancing test is actually referred to in his motion in limine number 4 when it relates to the music videos.
Right.
It's also referenced in the gang enhancement. It talks about highly inflammatory and highly prejudicial. And you're right, Your Honor, that's the whole point is, you know, jack in the box up and down all day in trial, objecting to, you know, and the cases, and you've been inundated with cases this morning, but the cases all speak to that. Even the cases that have denied bifurcation will opine, the judges, like, some of this stuff is highly inflammatory. It just is. I mean, they can't even pronounce the music videos in court because, I mean, I'm just saying that's the nature of this stuff. It's sex, it's violence, it's, you know, fake guns. I mean, it's terrible for a jury. And it's not a violent case. That's the other thing.
Your Honor, may I add one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
My co-counsel rightfully brings up that there are plenty of enhancements out there. 775 is an enhancement that can be applied to a number of crimes. Those things don't necessarily have to be bifurcated because they are relevant to the crime charge. We have
Sure.
charged the gang enhancement in this case, which is what makes all of this relevant evidence. As to the prejudicial effect, I can tell you that there are 50 plus YouTube videos, and I could have gone on for days, but I specifically picked ones that fit within the timeline, that made specific references that were relevant to this case and why this defendant would need to be carrying a firearm at that viewing. As it relates to the timeline, Your Honor heard testimony that this is a gang war that's been going on for 10 years. And in fact, in the Henry Hayes opinion, Your Honor will see that it relates to the same back and forth. But the state has narrowed this issue to 3 events and 3 music videos and a live video that's of course relevant because it occurred the day of
All right, so
the fight.
basically the state's position is the gang evidence makes it more likely that the defendant was in possession of a firearm that day.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And that the probative value is not substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice.
That's correct.
Address character evidence. Why is this not character evidence?
Your Honor, this is not character evidence because it goes to the gang enhancement. We are not
I
putting.
understand, but I can easily bifurcate
Sure.
And that and then if the jury finds the defendant guilty of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, then of course you have broad range to establish the gang enhancement.
Yes, Your Honor.
And that takes care of the character evidence issue because you're no longer using character evidence to try to prove conduct in conformity with it.
Yes, Your Honor. I would point to the Henry Hayes opinion. In that case, the court addresses the fact that these are things that are inextricably intertwined. This is not character evidence. This is inextricably intertwined. In order for us to prove up the gang enhancement, we have to prove that he's a gang member. We're not putting this on to say, look, he's a bad person. Look.
Right, but you don't have to prove gang enhancement to prove he's in possession of a firearm.
Yes, Your Honor, but as we've charged it is that way. And we believe that it is relevant to why this defendant possessed that gun. There is a danger that if this doesn't come in, that the defense gets to say, look at, he was targeted by these officers. Look how many there were. You've got the gang unit, you've got patrol, you've got the FBI out there, all because of this one person.
We're not going to say that. We're not going to say that. I can tell you right now, we're not going to say that.
Okay.
Just the only thing I'd like to respond is, we've been here. The bifurcation process to me, this took just 45 minutes, not even an hour. So what's the burden on the state? I'm not really seeing this. I think what's happening here is I think the court can recognize, let them try the case on its merits as felon in possession of a handgun. And they get the guilty verdict. Then this gentleman Daigle's there for 45 minutes and he gets his gang enhancement. That's what I see. And then we're not doing this again. That's my concern.
And Your Honor, this is not a novel issue. This is something that has been argued. It's just that there's not case law in the state of Florida at this time, aside from the Henry Hayes case. There is plenty of case law in California, which has been provided to the court. That it is not a character issue. It is, why is he the one that is possessing this gun? Why is this not transferred DNA? Because Noel Williams tells us in a song that he can't purchase a gun, so he gives a female money to do so. He's admitting to that. So then we have this female who comes in and says,
so for example, the first part of my Glock may very well be relevant evidence to prove a felon in possession charge.
Yes, Your Honor.
But there's a whole lot of this other stuff that might not very well be relevant to that charge.
Yes, Your Honor.
It would be relevant only to the sentence enhancement. So the question before the court is strictly, should the sentencing enhancement be bifurcated from the felon in possession? So tell me why the sentencing enhancement is inextricably intertwined to the felon in possession charge.
Yes, Your Honor. If I may have one moment to go to my notes. All right, so the state has, as I've already said, selected these events that are directly related and close in time to one another out of this extensive gang war that's been going on. We talked about Malik Beals' murder, which the defendant is a victim of. He is in the car when Malik Beals is murdered. We then go to the shooting at the funeral, which is motivation for this defendant to need to arm himself. And then we have the murder of Darian Self, which leads to the viewing. And in between all of that, we have these music videos, which are necessary to explain why this defendant is the possessor of the firearm and why the possession of that firearm is in furtherance of the gang. He gets shot at, and it doesn't stop him from creating these videos, baiting the gang. That is what they do. The reason that the state of Florida talked about who is this, who is this, who is this in all of these music videos is because it shows that he's baiting them still. Even up until that video that happens before the viewing, they're still going back and forth. It is the motivation for this defendant to have to arm himself. In fact, on the live video, Greenlight is responding to two people that are talking, and this defendant is on that video, that are talking about, I know where you're at, and Greenlight basically tells them to come. All you'll hear is brrr, the sound of gunfire.
What's the mixture of DNA that's on the firearm?
I can answer that off the top of my head. It's 12% there's 4 contributors, I think. of the DNA, they're unknown contributors, except for Mr. Williams has 12%. I believe the other one is 80%. It's an unknown female. And then I don't have the DNA report in front of me. I think it's the last one is unknown also. Is that correct?
You'd like for me to answer?
No, I think that's the DNA contribution. It's 12% as far as Mr. Williams is concerned.
There are 3 donors, yes, Your Honor. 2 of them are unidentified. Obviously, the female donor is most likely Antonisha Bryant. She is the purchaser of the gun. The state of Florida is
She
not.
wasn't tested though.
We did recently get her DNA, but we just didn't see a reason to send it off. We're not shying away from the fact that she purchased that firearm. It's her gun. It's the state's position that she buys guns because he can't.
Yeah, no, I
She carries
understand
guns
straw
because he
purchases
can't.
and all that stuff. I get all that. It's just a simple question. Whose DNA's on it?
It's the first I've heard about the DNA test. I don't know when am I going to get that?
It's not been sent off. I only indicated that we did get her swab. We have not sent it off.
I think that's going to be an issue. Isn't that Brady? If you've got the woman's DNA, don't you? Jeez, I'll sit down.
That's not potentially exculpatory.
Your Honor, we just got it. I'm happy to send it off.
When did you get it?
It's been about a week.
Okay.
It was at the same time this defendant was rearrested.
All right. I'm gonna take the motion to bifurcate under advisement. I need to review the case law. And just for benefit of counsel, right now I'm inclined to bifurcate, but that doesn't mean I'm ruling on what evidence is going to be admissible. I mean, just what I saw here, I could easily see some of it being admissible to a felon in possession charge and some of it not being admissible for one reason or another, whether that be 403 balancing, impermissible character evidence. There could be any number of well-placed objections. So, you know, we may have a lot of evidentiary issues to deal with at trial that there's no other way to deal with other than to deal with them as the evidence is offered and objected to, if it is. But I'll take it under advisement. I got to read this case law. All right. Mr. Page, do you have everybody here? All right, sounds like we got more time. Okay, so let's move on to this first motion to limit. All right, defense first motion in limine seeks to bar admission of any evidence related to the Beretta handgun found in the glove compartment. What's the state's position?
Your Honor, the state would be objecting.
Okay, so the state's going to seek to introduce evidence that there was a second handgun found.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, what is the basis for admissibility?
So the defense cites to a case where an individual was charged with an auto theft and there was testimony about a toy gun from when he was arrested. That case is not applicable. On the body camera footage in this case, when they're first stopped, Antonisha Bryant tells officers that she has a gun in the car. She mentions one gun. The officers then open the glove box and look inside and see 2 guns. So they go and they ask her about the 2 guns. She says that she has a Glock and a Beretta. At the time, the officer was mistaken as to what he saw as to the brand of gun. So he says, what about the Smith & Wesson? At that point, this defendant leans over to her and says, babe, you got a Smith & Wesson too. So she says to them, oh, that's mine. Later, Rashad Murphy arrives on scene and he takes claim to the Beretta in the car. He is, in fact, the purchaser of that firearm. So the sequence of events shows that Antonisha Bryant is actually unsure of what guns are actually in her car. So again, this is something that goes to why this defendant is the one that was possessing that gun and not Antonisha Bryant at that time. And it's obviously not favorable to the defendant that there's 2 guns in the car, but the state is not arguing that he was in possession of the Beretta. He's not a contributor to that DNA. But it does go to Bryant's credibility and why the jury can call her credibility into question, because she does not know what guns are in the car. And this defendant, in fact, leans over to tell her what gun she owns.
Okay, give me an idea of how the state's planning on introducing this evidence at trial.
Your Honor, the body camera footage would be played.
Okay. And then that body camera footage is going to lay out the dialogue you just mentioned.
Yes, Your Honor, and there's a chance that I'll be calling Antonisha Bryant in trial.
All right.
And Rashad Murphy, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
And then if you call her at trial, you would ask her something along the lines of, isn't it true that you didn't know how many guns were in your car?
Sure.
All right. Mr. Eckhart?
Yeah, I think it's an uncharged gun. We have the charge of we have the Glock that's been charged, obviously. And then there's this other uncharged gun that was legally owned by somebody. The person that showed up, it was Rashad Murphy. It was his gun. They scrubbed it for DNA. I think they printed it. No DNA, nobody's prints comes on it. And so now we've got another issue for the jury to resolve. It's like, now there's a second gun. And I don't know if that can be cured with instructions from the court. It's just a collateral issue. It's not charged. There's no evidence that he touched the gun or had possession of the gun. Detective Daigle didn't have
Well,
information.
I think the state's position, if I understand it correctly, is that their allegation is that Mr. Williams is the actual owner of the Glock firearm. And that the fact that the person who, what's the young lady's last name?
Antonisha Bryant.
Bryant. And is Bryant the purchaser of the Glock?
Of the Glock, yes.
Right. So the state's position is that the purchaser of their Glock isn't really the owner of the Glock, and that the fact that she doesn't know how many guns are in her car shows that it's not her gun. As to the body cam footage, is it the defense's position that it's all irrelevant, or that certain parts of it should be redacted? What's the defense's position there?
No, I was just specifically about the gun. The second gun is taken out of the glove box by Officer Pepper along with the first gun. I guess I'm trying to think which the sequences of which gun came out of the glove box first, whether the Glock came out or the Beretta came out first. I don't know off the top of my head, but my danger would be just the jury be confused, because now I've got 2 guns in the case. One has been charged. So I guess there'd have to be some sort of instruction.
All right. So I'm going to deny the defendant's first motion in limine as stated. That denial is without prejudice to raise objections. I think the defense position that is, that is addressed somewhat in the motion in limine, that there's limitations on what the state can do regarding that Beretta firearm, because Mr. Williams is not charged with possessing it, is well placed. I wish I could give you all more clear and more definite rulings on this stuff. But unfortunately, I don't think we can do that until trial comes along and we address it as it goes. But for example, Mr. Eckhart, so I can kind of guide you through trial, is I do think it would most likely be admissible to elicit evidence that Ms. Bryant, her lack of knowledge as to how many firearms were in her car or what kind, could be relevant to establish that Mr. Williams was the true possessor or owner of the Glock. Just at the same time, there's going to be limits on that.
Just to clarify, I think when I've watched those videos several times, I think when she's confronted by Pepper, she does say, I have a Glock and a Beretta. And then he says, what about
Well, that might actually help your
I
case.
think it will.
Right.
We'll just
So-
let it roll.
I mean, it may very well help you.
All right.
All right. So what I've said, I've just granted that without prejudice to defendant's right to renew the objection at trial. That's the best I can really do with it at this time. I'm going to give you all as much during these hearings. I'm going to give you all as much guidance as I can to hopefully narrow the trial issues.
Thank you.
I understand that from an evidentiary standpoint, this is likely to be a difficult trial, and we will deal with any of these issues as we need to and spend as much time on them as we need to. All right, let's go to the second motion in limine. And it looks like you're objecting to introduction of specific statement in the police report. Is that right, Mr. Eckhart?
Just the statement from Officer Peppers. I think it's throughout the police reports, and just to try to minimize any for prejudice at trial.
Okay.
He's familiar with Mr. Williams. He knows who Mr. Williams is. I don't know that he's ever arrested Williams, but there's case law that shows that, you know, jury sees that, they come to the conclusion he's guilty because the cops know who he is.
Sure. Let me hear from the state.
So Your Honor, this is kind of dependent upon what the court does as it relates to the bifurcation issue. But I would like to point out that Officer Peppers actually mistaken this defendant for Deshaun Williams. He doesn't know that it's Noah Williams, but that is neither here nor there.
That sounds kind of important.
Well, he's got a mask on. So, and Officer Peppers is not a gang detective. He knows these people
Okay.
just loosely. But this motion, I think, has to be decided once Your Honor decides whether or not this additional evidence comes in as it relates to the gang enhancement.
I'm not sure that's true because Peppers, you know, we could have it, if it's the gang information, that's fine, but Officer Peppers doesn't have to go that extra step and say, I know who he is from the neighborhood.
Sure, I'm not gonna ask him that.
Well, all I'm trying to, that's what the motion of limit is, just to protect that from happening.
Right. So I guess I want to make sure that the state understands what I'm saying about the motion to bifurcate. The motion to bifurcate doesn't solve all the gang evidence
Yes, Your Honor.
one way or the other, no matter how I rule on it, whether I grant it, whether I deny it. It doesn't, that, I see those as different issues. Well, let me be more clear. If I deny it, then obviously all the gang, not all the gang evidence, but the evidence that's deemed relevant as it's introduced at trial would come in. If I grant the motion to bifurcate, that doesn't mean that the state can't say the word gang. But we'll just have to deal with it as we do. Let's see. If I understand the motion, I'm trying to get at it's, Mr. Eckert, your motion is directed at a statement in the police report. Is that right?
Right. In this police report, one of the things that Peppers represents as police report is that upon coming to the scene, he sees my client with his shirt pulled up, and then he makes the assumption, which is, you know, the ultimate fact in the case, ultimate issue. I knew that he had a gun in his pants, or, you know, something to that effect, as opposed to, it looked like there was an object.
All right, I want to make, we're on the second motion in limine.
I guess it's the third one. The second one was the one we just talked about.
The second motion in limine, it's the statement is, it should be noted that subject Williams was personally known to all officers at the scene as a gang member who is also a convicted felon.
Yeah, that was the second one we just talked. That was the one we talked about as far as Officer Peppers knowing him during his police work.
Right.
He knew who Williams was.
It's,
If it helps the court, I do not intend to ask Officer Peppers. if
are you
he's
intending to
familiar.
introduce the police report into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so I'm going to grant the defendant's motion in limine as it pertains to the statement in the police report. Officer Peppers, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's go to the third motion in limine.
And that's the one I just spoke about earlier, that there's a statement from Officer Peppers that it appeared to him that when he engaged, I guess, my client at the driver's seat, that he saw my client's shirt pulled up and his pants were in disarray. And Peppers comes to the conclusion, from my training experience, he pulled a gun, a firearm out of his pants, which is the ultimate issue in the fact. If the jury heard that, they're going to, police officer says, hey, he pulled a gun out of his pants, even though he didn't see it, as opposed to saying, looks like he may have pulled an object out of his pants. I mean, that's what this motion's about. I just want to try to mitigate that so it doesn't get in front of the jury, because when the bell's wrong, the bell's wrong.
All right, let me hear from the state.
Your Honor, the motion actually calls this general behavior of certain kinds of offenders. I think it's important to talk about what Officer Peppers actually testified to, was that as a firearm carrier, as well as in his police experience, he has carried his gun in his waistband, and that is what made him think that there was a gun pulled from his waistband. That's not a criminal behavior in itself to have a gun in your waistband. What he visually saw and what he actually communicates to another officer on body camera is that it appears that his shirt is pulled up as though he had pulled a firearm from his waistband. It is just an observation he made as a person that carries a firearm. He is not saying, oh, this is what convicted felons do, or this is what criminals do. This is what people who carry their firearm in the front of their waistband do.
I'm going to deny the motion in limine, subject to the state laying an adequate foundation at trial. Mr. Eckert, you can make foundation-based objections at trial. Certainly, you can make plenty of arguments as to weight as well.
Understood.
All right. Address the fourth motion in limine. All right, so if I understand the objection correctly, Mr. Eckhart, this is an objection to any evidence regarding rap videos. Is that right?
Right. And just so you understand, I didn't know which videos
Right.
the prosecution was going to play till whenever, I guess it was a week or so ago. So this motion was filed before that. But the motion, we've been here a long time and you have the cases in front of you, but you'll
Right.
see that, several courts have just found that the violent nature, the profanity, that it's highly prejudicial to, the defendant when they're played, when they're not redacted. That's the basis. And of course, there was a First Amendment issue. And also the fact that, as we said before in an earlier hearing, he's an artist, like it or not, makes money doing this. He's got a great following throughout the world. And sometimes, a lot of times what he says isn't necessarily true. So there's that part of it too. So that's the danger, is that people are going to see this and see him dancing around with play guns and making these statements and feel that that's reality. So that's where we're at with that.
All right. I don't think I can rule on it at this time, is the problem.
I agree.
So I'm going to deny it, subject to defendant's ability to raise the objection to trial. All right, and then, now the state had filed a motion to revoke bond, but it looks like Judge Sachs had already revoked the bond.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I was unaware of that.
Looks like Judge Sachs revoked it at first appearance. That's your understanding, Mr. Eckhart?
Looked at the docket and I didn't see that, but I have trouble.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Sure, I've got the docket in front of me here.
it was, it's from the clerk. Bond was revoked orally in open court by Judge Sachs.
Okay.
That would have been at first appearance. He set new bond at none, so I'm going to deny the state's motion to revoke bond as moot. Um, Is the newly filed case in this division as well?
It will be, yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
To this division.
I'm going to guess that's not the last we've heard about bond.
Oh, no, it probably is not. I don't know.
But we'll deal with that in due course. I'm going to review this case law. I'll get a ruling out to you all on the motion to bifurcate promptly. I understand the importance of that to both the state and the defense as you move forward in these matters. Everybody think they're going to be ready for trial on the 3rd?
DNA evidence would be kind of important, I think, to have constitutionally. I think that's an issue.
All
Your
right.
Honor, may I just address that?
Sure.
I'm not sure how Antonisha Bryant's DNA being on the firearm or not on the firearm is some sort of Brady or exculpatory evidence. Prior to me having her swabbed, the defense never asked for that to be done. I did it just because she was at the traffic stop. We had gotten a search warrant. I was trying to think through how I was going to present this case. I'm happy to send it off. I can't tell this court how long that's going to take for it to be tested. And again, the state isn't claiming that this gun was not purchased by Antonisha Bryant. We're going to tell the jury we expect that
Right.
that large amount of DNA to belong to her.
And you could, if you stipulate to it, that'd be great.
You willing to stipulate to it?
Stipulate to that. Is that my expert? It's important to my DNA expert in Ohio, I'll tell you that much.
I can't stipulate to something that I don't know to be fact.
And I guess my argument would be, Judge, once the government takes that step and collects that evidence, I think they've got an obligation.
Your Honor, I'm happy to send it off, but I can't guarantee it'll be done by October 3rd.
I understand. That's Mr. Williams has to decide how he wants to deal with that. I mean, in fairness, I can understand the defense's point that if it's an 80% mixture, or if 80% of the DNA, I may be messing my figures up, is a female, and his defense is that the gun really is hers, that would seem pretty relevant to the defense.
But Your Honor, we're saying the same thing. The state's going to say that.
Okay.
We're missing the step on the transfer DNA, as you know.
Right.
Girlfriend.
I mean, and to be clear, I mean, the state decides how it proves its case. They're not under any affirmative obligation to swab anybody. They can't disclose evidence they don't have. Right now, all they've got is a swab and a kit. It's anyway. Is the state going to send it, or? I mean,
Your Honor, I'm happy to send it off, but again, that is with the understanding that there is a chance it is
Right, I
not done
would-
by October 3rd.
yeah, I would expect it probably wouldn't be, but I don't know.
I don't know where this case is going, but again, I'm always looking big picture. I don't want to do this again. You don't want to do this again. I think once the state collects the evidence, I think that in a case like this, where you have DNA experts and it's trace DNA, I personally, I would be sending that off if I had that job again. That's just what I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's for council to work.
Yeah, I
out. That's not for the court to
I
work out.
understand.
Anything else?
Not from the state.
Oh, let's see.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Let's come back on the 19th, just to check in. If I haven't issued my ruling, that'll give you all an opportunity to yell at me for that.
And the bond hearing, is it, that's gonna be before this court? I just file a motion for the bond?
Yeah, that would be before this.
Okay. And then I'll advise the court as far as the DNA experts availability. She may have been calling me while we were in court.
Yeah. If there's a, let me ask counsel a question. Would it make more sense to come back on, come back next week?
Your Honor, I'm not going to be available next week.
Okay.
19th is fine with me. I've already got it.
Let's come back on the 19th. If there's, Mr. Eckhart, if there's a problem with your expert, let the state and my assistant know, and then maybe we can get on a call and figure out what the appropriate next step is. If it's possible to do it, I'd like to get the case tried as scheduled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't even see anybody ready to go next. So we may be done. All right, court will be in recess for 5 minutes. I see Mr. Page through the window. Still can't find anybody for his hearing? I see he's now got the door open looking both ways.